Sterling and Stone presents Collective Inkwell's Threshold by Sean Platt and David Wright. Narrated by Sean Platt. Threshold, Chapter 2. Scott. The man smiled. Mr. Dawson. Scott hated everything about him. The man's phony smile, his tiny gold-rimmed glasses, the perfect head of wavy milk chocolate hair and trim waist, the phone on his belt, and most of all, the suit that looked like it could have fed them for a month. Scott wanted to punch him, hard. He wanted to fall asleep with a dull ache in his bruised knuckles after having felled the man who ambushed his daughter in the driveway and drove them from their home. Who's asking? Scott's heart beat faster as he realized things weren't making sense. The car was a rental, and a nice one. The Italian suit was wrong. He had warned the kids about a man in a tie, but never pictured silk. The person sent to deliver their paperwork would be a glorified clerk, not the lawyer himself. The man reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to Scott. "My name is Jared Davenport, sir. I've come." Scott shook his head, held his palms out, and fell several steps back. He grabbed Hazel, almost too roughly, and spun her to Hudson, who had followed him to see what was happening. "Take her inside. I need a minute." "Sir, whatever you have, I don't want it. I'm not taking it, and you need to get off my property. Now." Scott had to swallow hard not to roar. He spoke through gritted teeth and barely kept himself from growling. He was tempted to say, "Before I call the cops," but faced the likelihood that the man was there with permission. "I mean you no harm, Mr. Dawson." He cleared his throat and took a step toward Scott. "I'm here about Holly." Hazel pulled away from Hudson and ran toward the stranger. She grabbed Scott's hand and yelled, "Mommy?" Scott had one happy second. His heart gave a grateful thud, and his mind swam, brightened by an unexpected spark of hope. Then he felt crushed ice in his bloodstream as he realized that whatever this man, lawyer, had to say about Holly, it couldn't be good. Good news meant Holly standing in their lightly stained driveway, not this mysterious stranger in his expensive suit and charitable expression. Scott turned to Hudson. "Take her inside. Now." Hudson closed his mouth, took Hazel by the wrist, and turned her toward the house. "No!" She pulled away. "It's about Mom, not the house. I'm allowed to know that. I'm allowed to be here." Scott bellowed with his back to the stranger. "Go inside with your brother, now!" Hazel's eyes turned into two great lakes as she tried to hold water inside them. "Come on, Hazel." Hudson took his sister by the shoulder and led her toward the porch. Scott waited a moment for Hazel and Hudson to get inside the house, and for his breathing to settle, before turning to face the patient stranger. The man seemed as if he had nowhere to go, and was in no way offended when Scott finally found his voice. "This had better be good." He cleared his throat again. "Yes, of course, Mr. Dawson. I can understand your alarm. Hopefully my presence will be helpful." His smile seemed awkward as he tried again to hand him the envelope. Scott reluctantly took it. "You can read that later. I'm sure you'd like to get back in the house. But please, let me give you the broad strokes. Again, sir, my name is Jared Davenport. I'm a lawyer representing the late Mr. Alistair Galloway. You and your children have been named in Mr. Galloway's last will and testament." Who the hell is Alistair Galloway? It sounded made up, like a rich villain in a movie Scott wouldn't see. "Ah, yes, we did anticipate some confusion." "Some confusion?" "Try total confusion. I don't know anyone with the last name Galloway, except for my third-grade teacher, and I don't remember her first name, but it sure as hell wasn't Alistair. I have no idea what this has to do with me or my family." Yes, Mr. Galloway was under the assumption that Holly wasn't exactly forthcoming about her family tree. "What are you saying, Davenport?" Mr. Galloway is Holly's uncle, husband to her Aunt Lucille. I've never heard of him. I'd remember a rich Uncle Alastair. Yes, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Dawson. Davenport held his awkward smile. But I can assure you, Holly was quite aware of her uncle, whether she spoke of him or not. A too long pause settled between them. It seemed to Scott that the man was waiting for him to say, or maybe do, something. So what do you want from me? I'm so sorry. I feel like we've started this all wrong. Again, I know how difficult things have been for you and your family. How do you know anything about my family? Scott's anger was swelling. He could feel Hudson and Hazel staring from the dining room. It is my business to know everything about your family. My family's business, actually. What do you mean by that? I'm a lawyer with one client, same as my father and my father's father before him, and so on. It's a large family, or was, with many branches. Our task is to keep eyes on them all. I could continue, but prefer not to do so here. There are things we'll need you to do, some things that must be tended to. These things must be done elsewhere. I'll need you and your family to come with me to Clovis Point in 3 days. Clovis Point? Where's that? Right outside Galloway Falls, Oregon. The envelope has a letter explaining the nature of Mr. Galloway's last will and testament, along with your itinerary. Itinerary? Yes, Mr. Dawson. Everything has been arranged. You'll find plane tickets for you, Hudson, and Hazel. Our man Johnston will pick you up at the airport. A paid-for itinerary sharpened reality. Sorry, Davenport. I can't do that. Too many things happening. Scott thrust his thumb behind him. We're days from losing this house. I'm on pins and needles waiting to hear from Holly. And, well, I can't just drop shit and go. At least not if you're unwilling to tell me what this is about. I understand your concern, and your hesitation, but I assure you this is in your family's best interest, Mr. Dawson. You and your children are in the will because of your relationship with Holly. She is the intended beneficiary. Because she is missing, you 3 will inherit her share. Scott looked around, as if searching for a hidden camera. Again, I apologize for the lack of clarity, but this is all expressly detailed in Mr. Galloway's will. You must be present at the estate for the reading. No exceptions. I can promise, however, that your house here means nothing. Not anymore. Let the bank take it. You can leave and never return. Once the will is read, housing will never be a concern for your family again. What? Scott almost whispered. Yes, Davenport nodded. I promise you'll be quite happy once the will is read. But that is all I can say. Again, everything you'll need is in the envelope, along with my card. Call if you need anything at all. I'm here to help you however I'm able. 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day? Yes. Davenport continued to nod and smile. Because of Holly? Yes. The lawyer broke into a quiet chuckle. I know how odd this must seem, but everything will make sense when we see you on Wednesday. He gestured toward the house. I see that Hudson and Hazel are worried. Please tell them there's nothing to fret, and that although I'm afraid I don't have good news about their mother's whereabouts, I do offer some very real hope for all of you. Still in disbelief, Scott said, I'll make sure to tell them. Davenport gave Scott a final smile, a 2-fingered salute, then climbed into his rental, pulled out of the driveway, and shrank down the street as Scott stood staring. After what felt like forever, he turned and started walking back on soggy legs toward the house. Things had been too hard for too long. Ever since the Dawsons had lost it all in 2009, life at large had felt a bit too hard. Yet still Scott managed to fill most days with a deep belief in a better tomorrow. That wasn't his nature, but it had been Holly's. When the numbers finally refused to work, quitting months after they should have, Scott found himself upside down, sobbing in an icy tub for hours until she found him, then dabbed his tears and whispered until he stopped crying. They slashed their income in half and said all was well. Scott could finally become the father he wanted to be, the kind he had always imagined being. He lost his business, but gained presence, and in the last 5 years had grown to know his children in ways that few fathers ever could. But Holly's disappearance had darkened their world. Hazel's quirks were getting quirkier. Hudson's moods were getting moodier. And Scott felt rage creeping through his every crevice of thought. Holly had given them balance, and now she was gone. Scott looked up at their old home as he stepped onto the porch, then over to the dining room where his children stared through the window, trying to untangle his expression. He swallowed, then stepped onto the porch and into the house. It was time to say goodbye to what wasn't working. Time to believe in the impossible, like Holly would have wanted. The children erupted in questions. "Pack," he said. 3 days and we're gone. Hudson said, "We lost the house?" "Probably, but who cares? We won't need it where we're going." "Where are we going?" Hazel asked. "Someplace better than here." You've been listening to Threshold by Sean Platt and David Wright. To see all the books in the Sterling & Stone catalog, please visit sterlingandstone.net. To help decide what we read next, please visit sterlingandstone.net/indie fiction podcast. See you next time.